This week on the BackTable Podcast. So what's next for ProScan and the group?
We are very focused on thoughtful growth, thoughtful partnering opportunities, raising the bar of care in the environments where we are comfortable playing, and then most importantly, servicing and maintaining our client base, our two, soon to be 3 hospitals in Naples, and I think we have 10 or 11 outpatient imaging centers, and then, focusing on our philanthropy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BackTable Innovation Podcast. You can find all previous episodes of our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and of course on backtable.com. This is our next installment in the BackTable Innovation Show, where you're going to hear stories from entrepreneurs who are helping to drive healthcare forward through health tech innovation. This is Bryan Hartley as your host this week. I'm a radiologist living in Nashville and co-founder of an early-stage device company in the imaging space. I am very excited to welcome back Dr. Stephen Pomeranz'a for round 2. As we mentioned previously, Dr. Pomeranz'a is a renowned radiologist, author, athlete, and entrepreneur. He was one of the first MRI-trained fellows in the country and writer of the MRI Total Body Atlas. He's also the founder, CEO of ProScan Imaging, and co-founder of Medality, formerly known as MRI Online. He is the most interesting man in the world. I wish we could cue the Dos Equis music now, but today we're going to hear a little more about the evolution of ProScan Imaging and some of the trials, tribulations, and successes along the way. With that, welcome back, Dr. Pomeranz'a.
Bryan, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Maybe you can refresh our memories just a little bit and kind of take us through, just briefly through the early days. You can start in your childhood and run through and tell us. I'd love to end with how and why you came to start ProScan.
Sure. So I think I told you in the past, so eventually I got the opportunity to go down to Miami as one of the first MR fellows in the country. And that was a true blessing. I ran into a great mentor down there named Manuel Viamonte, who's no longer with us. And he was just fantastic to me. There was a group of instructors down there who were fantastic to me. And, I learned MR from the very, very beginning, from almost the first year it was ever available. And with that, I came back to Cincinnati, worked as an attending at the University of Cincinnati for a year, and then went on to a conventional private practice. And it was there things really started happening for me. I was very motivated to teach the religion of MRI because I really saw it as a modality that would change the course of medical treatment for patients and medical history, really, and it has. Started a course. My wife baked a cake. 10 people showed up, then 30, then 100, then 200, then 300. And eventually I developed, like most consultants, a consulting army. And that army grew to about 14,000. And those people would rely on me to help them set up their MRIs, to read their MRIs. And from that, a consulting business was born, and I actually contributed all of those consulting dollars, which were substantive, to my group, started a fellowship, started a residency, and at that time, I started writing books. And my first book, this is a real entrepreneurial story in itself, took me, hundreds and hundreds of hours. W.B. Saunders was the publisher. They're no longer in business. And I think I made $40,000 and they made several $1 million.
Wow.
And I said, Bryan, that just ain't right, So
no.
I proceeded to construct my own publishing business with my own artists, my own designers, my own sales team. And the Total Body Atlas was born. And that was something that I offered to major publishers, but they said it's too expensive. I wanted to do it on the best paper, the best everything. And eventually I did. It was a 3-volume atlas. It still is in use today. It was a $900 3-volume product, and I ended up selling about 10,000 units of it. And so it was a major success. And after that, I stayed in the publishing business for quite some time while I was consulting and running a radiology practice in Little Cincinnati, Ohio. But eventually, I got restless. I was very discouraged by the administrative leadership. I remember asking for new equipment, Bryan, and they said they didn't have the money. It was a wealthy hospital.
And you were bringing in a lot of money, right?
I was bringing in a lot of money. to the radiology group alone, I was bringing in a couple of million extra dollars to support their night coverage, their fellowship, their residency. And I was putting all that into the group. But more importantly, I went to the head of the hospital. I said, I need new equipment. I need to stay current. People are coming from all over the world to learn about MRI. And they said they didn't have the money. They had lost, $2 or $3 million in the gift shop. And when I heard the gift shop, I said, I got to go. This is just not.
Yeah, they're not running it right if they can't run the gift shop
They
right.
weren't real business people. They were administrative people. Mm-hmm. And they were lovely people, by the way. So I left. I took some of my first fellows with me and took the consulting business with me, took the publishing business with me. And, MRI Education Foundation, which was already born in 1985, went with me. And that was the first name of the company before it morphed into ProScan Imaging. At that time, I was doing some consulting work for imaging centers. Those folks actually ended up selling those centers to me. I built my own, and ProScan Imaging was born as an outpatient imaging business. Now, what was interesting was I knew enough that I was not a scaler. I did not know how to produce a revenue cycle, an HR department, a legal department, and I knew I needed somebody special if I was to remain a physician and not a pure business guy that learned all those things from the ground up. And so I'll get back to that in a minute. But the other thing I knew was that medicine is a service. It's a local service business. So I spent, and with some of my key people, time with the trainer for all the managers of the Four Seasons Hotel in Chicago. His name was Hans Wolleman. And I learned how to deliver legendary, luminary service to human beings.
Wait, how did you back up a little bit? Because that's a very interesting, I don't see a lot of people doing that. So how did you even come to this realization that you needed this training? Was this just, how did you come to this? Because that sounds incredible that you would go find somebody in the hotel business to learn service from.
You're clearly experienced, Brian. You've tapped into something that's really important in the story. But, I was giving my course up in the Four Seasons every Thanksgiving before the RSNA, and I watched this guy do his thing. I watched how he interacted with his employees. Every detail every T was crossed, every I was dotted, how he handled conflict. And I have a very intuitive, extraordinary wife, and she looked at me and she said, this man knows how to deliver service. You should tap into that.
Wow.
And so it was her suggestion.
Wow.
And so I did. And he was so gracious. He's still with us today. He's a gardener in Vail, Colorado. He's retired, but I still do talk to him intermittently. But he really set the tone for something that just did not exist in medicine, and that was delivering incredible service to patients that walked in the door just as if they were a client of the Four Seasons or the Ritz Hotel. And that was an inflection point, clearly. The other inflection point, Brian, was, when I got to a certain size, I had to make a decision. Do I jump off and become a pure business person, like some of my colleagues have done, or do I stay in medicine, in radiology? I had a strong medical background, a clinical background, and I loved it, and I knew that was where I wanted to be. So I spent about a year and a half searching for a person that could run ProScan, and I really worked very hard to find such an individual. And I did find such an individual. I wasn't sure about him in the beginning, and I called one of his references, who was a Dutch gentleman who had worked with him for a long time, been in, I think, the high-end business world, including Procter and Chiquita for 40 years. And I told him what I needed, what I wanted to do, and he stopped me within about, maybe a minute of my soliloquy and said, Dr. Pomeranz'a, he said, I've worked for 40 years in the business world. This is the best business person I have ever worked with, in his heavy Dutch accent. He said, and if you don't hire him, you're an idiot. And so I said, thank you, Horst. And I hung up the phone and I hired him. And we've been together for over 20 years. What he did was remarkable. He set up, everything: human resources, revenue cycle management, customer service, finance, a real estate department, a legal department. And, he made it into a world-class national, international business. As opposed to an administrator, he had run, billion-dollar companies. He had been in sales. He had been in marketing. He had been in the telecom space, which played heavily into ProScan's evolution into the first teleradiology and maybe first telemedicine business in the United States and perhaps in the world. And that's a testament to him. He automated everything. He scaled everything. So that today, we have about 40 offices and somewhere between 550 to 600 clients. We're in every state. We're actively in 49 states, almost every U.S. protectorate. And that has led to a very unique experience for the radiologists that join us, that have the vision that we have.
Wow. So from that point, how many offices did you have? And then what did you kind of scale to at that point?
Sure. Well, when he joined, we were probably serving about 50 to 70 locations. We probably had about 12 offices and no hospitals. That has expanded to about 40 offices. We're very deliberate, disciplined investors, probably close to 600 or more customers that we read for and help manage. And again, we're in every state just about in the union, and we were reading internationally. We were reading for and still read for almost every U.S. protectorate, Puerto Rico, Guam, Samoa, etc. And then he did something else which was rather unique and very interesting for radiologists, although it's very hard for them to wrap their brain around it. And that is, he created, Bryan, what I call technology investment opportunities, which is what I consider real partnership. When you become a partner in a radiology group, what are you? The standard partnership model is you work for less money for 2 or 3 years or for a year. You make money for the other people. You own a receivable. It's a little harder to fire you. You're part of the hospital contract, but that's it. Most of the time, you don't own tangible assets, or certainly if you do, they're not major appreciating assets. I don't know that the word partnership is the right word for that, and that was the model for 50 years. And then when you became a partner, you made more money, and the next younger person stepped in and they made money for you. But today, the security of those types of groups is in question. I just watched a 60-person group that had been in business for 50 years in the Midwest get fired by a large hospital system because of a personality dispute. And, they took on a private equity replacement, which turned out to be a major, major mistake for the hospital that did that. So, the private practice model, as we used to know it, is ceasing to exist. Now there are a bunch of different models that exist out there. You can be owned by a hospital. You can be owned by private equity. You can be in academic medicine. And then, our practice, which is very unique. We're independent. We are privately held. We have basically no debt other than the equipment that we buy, so we're not over leveraged. Some of these companies are over leveraged by 10, 15, 20 to 1. It's just not a sustainable thing. You could probably run that for 3 or 4 years, but eventually somebody is going to take the hit on that, and that's going to be not only the owners but the medical physicians themselves, and that is really unfortunate. Is that what you see happening with some of the rad partners? And I mean, they're in the news all the time with their large debt. I think they just raised another large amount of money I assume that's to service that debt too. Yeah, well, I don't want to name names, but but I guess since you have, I think their debt is something on the order of $12 billion.
Wow.
Their debt was recently downgraded. Mm-hmm. So, that's the first thing that can happen before, real negative event occurs. Now they are going back and trying to rehire radiologists because I think they realized they had not treated the radiologists who are the talent well enough. And they're going back and trying to recover a lot of those radiologists. But what those radiologists don't understand is there's still going to be an event for companies.
A reckoning.
Yeah, a reckoning. There's going to be a reckoning for companies like that. And so if you want to work for 2 or 3 years and make a bunch of money and then move on to something else, okay, fine. But there will be a reckoning. And there was a reckoning for, I think, a company called, I think it's called Oxyman. And they just filed for bankruptcy. I think they were over 1,000 radiologists, so, pretty big organization. So there is a reckoning for a lot of these PE firms that don't understand the service model. So having a private enterprise with diversification, I think, is critical. So,
and that leads into the technology investment opportunities model.
It does.
And I'd love to hear kind of what does that mean first off, and some of your examples.
Sure. So the simplest one is the imaging center one. I mean, that's technology. And when we have a new imaging center, the physicians have the opportunity to invest in that new imaging center. And there's usually a lead investor, in that market. And, there are numerous benefits to that besides the cash flow, besides the level of excitement and interest and sense of ownership, which include certain tax advantages that are beyond the scope of the discussion today, but there's all kinds of secondary advantages there. So that would be the most obvious basic one. But then we get into things like we made an investment well under $100,000 probably 20 years ago in basically a software widget. Michael O'Brien, who came from the telecom world, led the charge in this, brought a lot of his talent with him. And our team got the opportunity to invest in that. Now, not a lot of people understood it, and not a lot of the folks in our organization invested, but some did, maybe 10%. And those that did, it went out 6 or 7 years later to a company called Medality at $14 million. So I don't know what the X was on that, but it was substantial. So that was a low risk, very high reward investment. And then the next one that came around, a lot more people were interested. And the next one was a very, very challenging one. It was an imaging clinical research organization that we owned with the MGH team in Boston, the Harvard hospital. And they were interested in other things, building a hospital in Dubai. So eventually, mid-investment, we bought them out and then reinvested money in that business. We invested it in sales. We invested it in leadership. And that one went out at around, it was a pretty sizable investment. It went out at around 9 or 10x 7 years later. We leveraged that one. We took a $4 million note out on it. We didn't really put up any cash until we made those hires midway through. So we never had to write, very many checks, but we were on the hook for $4 million. And that was a pride-swallowing siege, very, very difficult because it was located in Boston. We had to travel, but it was successful. Another one that we did was we took all of our educational materials and we spun it off into its own independent company, of which ProScan is just an investor now, called Medality, which, in my opinion, is the primary lead, most visionary medical education company in the United States. I encourage all to get on and look at the quality of the information, the brevity of the information, the density of the information. And that has over 4,000 subscribers now and is quite successful. It's a household name in the radiology space and continuing to grow at an exponential rate. So that one is evolving. Another one, and again, all the radiologists got to invest in these, and the deeper we got into the investments, because of our success, the more people signed up.
Right.
Even the most conservative ones, Bryan, and the most risk-adverse ones.
Well, they trust now. I think once you start generating a trend of success, I don't think anybody wants to be left out in the cold.
Yes, you're right. And trust is earned. You get a gut
That's
feeling
right.
about people, but sometimes your gut is wrong. But nothing beats a history. Nothing beats working shoulder to shoulder with somebody and seeing how they perform in times of success, but especially in times of stress. Do they turn tail and run, or do they buck up and get knocked down and get right back up? And that's the true test of a great partner and a leader as well. So the next one was a very interesting one. Is one brought to us by a group of very smart Silicon Valley type people, programmers, investors, and that one is a genetics company that dovetails with imaging. I won't get into too much detail on that. But that one is, sort of 3/4 of the way through its investment cycle. It's doing well, and we'll see what happens with that one. That one could end up being, a $500 million to $1 billion outcome or more. I mean, that's a really, really interesting business and a very challenging one, but they're at the forefront.
Moonshot
weaving
technology.
Weaving genetics into the imaging space. And so that really leads us to why would you want to join an organization like ours? And I think that's an important discussion. I know you're at a university. I believe you're at Vanderbilt. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Yeah. So that's a really esteemed radiology residency program. And practicing in an academic center is terrific. If that is in your DNA. You have to want to teach, you have to want to publish, you have to want to give lectures, and your success is not measured by the amount of revenue you generate. Now, it doesn't hurt to be a big revenue generator in the academic world, but it's not the only or the primary aspect of your success, nor is it in our practice either, but it is in many practices. So there's a lot of similarities between us and academics in that we do value teaching. We do value intellectual development. We spend a lot of time with our fellows. We have rotating residents, and we train each other. We share cases all day long. And, we'll take our 20 biggest misses and review them. We just did it a few days ago with almost everybody online. But I think understanding what our practice consists of would be very germane to this discussion.
Definitely. And so with that, I think thinking about what our listeners might want to know, assuming they're physicians wanting to go into practice, deciding between academics or private practice, and what should they be looking for? I mean, you've mentioned this is interesting. The way I would kind of rephrase it is look for groups with unique business model opportunities, maybe offering more than just, what you keep what you kill type of model. And, is there room for growth, for leverage, for learning? It sounds like your group does that in spades, but is that what you would look for or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lecture that I give, Bryan, and I just gave it to the internal medicine residents, 6 of whom are going into radiology at Naples Community Hospital. And in that lecture, I gave them the 25 questions that you need to ask yourself and the person you're interviewing with when you're applying for a job. And perhaps a podcast, isn't the place to share those, but I am happy to share those with, young physicians because I care about them, and with, university residents and fellows, because I think these are really important aspects to self-assess and to assess externally. But, we've got, just as a unique descriptor of who we are, we have people that read 30, 40 MRs a day or do basic general radiology, and we've got at least 5 radiologists that individually have interpreted 500,000 MRIs. We'd probably have at least 5 of those. I myself and one of my partners have interpreted between 1 million and 2 million MRIs. I started at the beginning. He did not start at the beginning, but he was a fellow, and he is just an absolute machine. And that's what he likes to do. So our total MR experience over time, is going to be, well over 5 million MRIs. We've never had a judgment, which is absolutely extraordinary.
That's insane. Yeah.
We've never had a Medicare violation, but it presents a really unique opportunity. Now, we do a lot of other high-end imaging. We do a lot of PET. We do a lot of high-end CT, especially cardiac CT. So it's not just MR, and of course, we do general radiology. That's not our focus, but we absolutely do it because we have to, and it's important to the care of the patient. But, we're uniquely positioned to be successful in what is less than an ideal environment right now. We read low field, high field, weight-bearing, closed, open. We see pathology presented in thousands of iterations. We might see 100 ganglion pseudocysts in a week. We see 50 MRs of the wrist a day. We may see 40 PET scans a day. So, if you think of it, think of Tom Brady being your quarterback on a peewee team. Statistically, we're going to be better than most. It's just a fact because we have seen so much. So our guys become world-class at what they do. At the same time, they have these investment opportunities. And we reach out to probably over 1,000 practices that we serve in one way or another that allows us, access to business lines and technology and AI ideas that most practices don't have. And at the same time, where even though Mike runs the company, it is controlled by radiologists. It's a debt-free environment. It's not a leveraged environment. And they get to invest in very interesting things. They may not understand them in the beginning, but we educate them on them. And then we get involved in things like learning, of course, as I've described, is so important to us. It's part of our DNA. We do things like synthetic, neuroquant, clearly, HeartFlow, VisAI, ICE. These are all AI offerings that we participate in. So it's not like we're running, a gazillion miles an hour and not paying attention to the technology advances that are occurring. And all this is happening while our licensure department licenses us in all 50 states, U.S. protectorates, et cetera. So there is a lot going on here.
So what opportunities are there for, let's say there's some young rads out there, or rads looking for a change. What opportunities are there in ProScan?
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating because, that most young radiologists don't understand what partnership really means unless they have a business background like you do, Bryan, or they've been to, Harvard Business School or Columbia Business School. They hear partner and a light goes off in their head. Oh, yeah, that's for me. 2 years to partnership. They don't bother to investigate what that actually means. So our radiologists can be managing partners that manage an entire radiology sector once they're done with their fellowship, in a geography, let's say, where they grew up. For instance, one of our radiologists who was a Emory-trained body imager did fellowships in neuro and MSK with us and wanted to live in Texas where his family is. And so after getting trained and learning a little bit about the business of radiology, he's going back to Texas, and we were opening up offices in the Texas market. I won't get too much more specific than that. We have people that, want to live in Korea to be near their mother, their ailing mother. So they will read, they're fellows, they will read for us in Korea. We have an office in Israel. So there's a remote opportunity. One of our radiologists who's been with us for 25 years, also a former fellow, a very high volume reader, said, hey, my wife's family is in Norway. They're getting up in years. I want to spend some time in Norway. I said, okay, let's go. And our team, set them up and they read from Norway. Now, of course, there are certain compliance issues that we have to respect. And we do that. Some of those cases have to be double read. The person that trained with me as a fellow back in the early 80s is now working with ProScan, and he reads for us, in the States, and then sometimes he has to go to Canada. And when he does, It's really neat. We read cases together, just like we used to do when we were fellows in the early 80s, when we were puzzling over these MRIs together. I mean, that is a really joyful experience. So, it runs the gamut, everything from a managing partner all the way down to somebody that is virtually reading, off-site from another location. And, we like to have people that are in some of our major locations too, which are Louisville, Indy, Cincinnati, Florida, Columbus, to name a few.
Great. And so when you say partner, you're meaning you have all these opportunities, you have ownership. That's what you're talking about. And, just to be clear, most other private groups, when they say partner, that means your salary goes up after 2 years when you, quote, make partner, but maybe that's it. Is that correct?
Yeah, maybe that's it. It may be a little harder to fire you if they want to, but I mean, as a group, you can lose the contract. And,
right.
And that used to never happen, Brian, and now it's happening with some frequency because of the stresses in the industry. So our people get to own real estate. They get to own technology companies. They get to own, MR facilities. They get to own the equipment in those MR facilities and more. They own real, tangible assets, and that is real partnering. That is real business ownership, where you're investing side to side with people that are knowledgeable, that can mentor you and support you as your dreams grow.
Now, do you have to put in your own money? Obviously you do, but I'm just like, how does that work? What are the mechanics of investing in, whether it's, you want to be part owner in the real estate or the technology or whatever? How do you see that usually playing out? Do people say, all right, take a cut of my paycheck every year, or I'll borrow money to do this, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, it's total parity. And there are a number of vehicles where they can come up with that money. They can go to a bank. It can be an internal loan. As I said, it could be an external loan. They can write a check, but it's total parity. So let's say one of the senior people is investing in a software company, and that's $100,000. Well, the senior person puts down $20,000 and they get 20%. The person who is younger in the company, maybe been there 3 years, and they're investing exactly the same amount of money for exactly the same percentage. So there's no penalty whatsoever for being younger. So there's total parity in those investment opportunities when they become available.
How often do they come up?
That's a hard question to answer, but they sometimes come up in clusters. Sometimes we'll go through a dry period, but we're very disciplined, conservative investors. So we don't just willy-nilly go into anything. We scrutinize it extremely carefully. So I would say they come up a couple times a year because, we are constantly expanding our portfolio of offices. But as you can see, some of the bigger, what I call non-direct radiology investments, there's been about 4 or 5 of those, over a period of, say, the last 12 years. So you can do the math there. But then besides that, there's also, imaging centers. There's usually, about 2 of those a year.
Wow. Okay. Where do you get your deal flow for technology companies? Like, where do those come about? Are they incubated internally, externally? They'll come up. Is it just one of your partners says, hey, I got tapped about potentially investing in this. Do you want to, can I share it with the group? How does that work?
Yeah, Brian, it's a great question. It's usually a combination. It's usually something we've seen on the internet, something that somebody has contacted us about. We have a very established, deep network of colleagues around the country that often come to us and say, what do you think about this? Would you be interested in this? So it's really a combination. We don't have somebody going out there casting a net necessarily for these opportunities. I would have to say most of them come to us. We're very venerable. We've been in the business a long time. We're respected. We've been doing this for well over 30 years. And we do understand the technical space well. So people have come to know that we are a good organization to bounce things off of, to request an investment, and so on. So that hasn't been a problem for us, whether it's AI, whether it's a technical play, even a real estate play, or even buying another radiology business or practice, which we don't do with any frequency, because usually there are a lot of warts that come with that that are hard to recognize.
As some of these large private equity groups are probably realizing.
Yes. I mean, they're trying to recover now, and hats off to them.
Yeah.
Business is about getting knocked down and being very resilient and
That's right.
Getting right back up.
That's right.
Or as Dwayne Wade says, get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. I never understood that, but in business, you got to
clearly resonated.
It resonated totally.
So tell me also, if you were, a young radiologist or physician, entrepreneur, or you had aspirations to be an entrepreneur, what kind of guidance would you provide right now on where are some opportunities that you should be looking?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would find a mentor. Find somebody that you trust who's a little bit more senior, that's had some experience. Then the next thing I would do is I would look at the track record of anything that you're entertaining doing. If they've been in business for a year or 2 or 3, that not necessarily, but that can be a red flag. That's more risky as opposed to somebody that's been around for 20 years, 30 years. The next thing I would do is I'd assess what the nature of the contractual relationship is. Are you an employee? Are you a partner that is not really a partner? You're guised as an employee. I'd also look at, how the organization has done financially over the years. They're not necessarily going to provide you with a yearly P&L or with a statement, but there are ways to drill into that by asking a series of questions, and a smart young entrepreneurial radiologist will figure out quite quickly whether they're getting a straight story or not by evaluating the level of detail that they are given verbally, and there are ways to go about cross-checking that. The next thing I do is I'd see what kind of debt they have. And, are they driven by private equity, by venture capital? Has the business turned over? Who has left? Who has come? Those are just some of the things that I encourage my young proteges and mentees to evaluate when they're looking at any potential job, whether it be in the entrepreneurial space or not. And I don't necessarily consider ours entrepreneurial. I think ours is a very low risk scenario.
Right.
The term entrepreneurial
means startup to some early risk, right?
Yeah, denotes early risk, and we are not that. I mean, we are
you've proven your model.
We have.
Yeah, and that's, I've heard lots of entrepreneurs talk about, find something that works and then scale it. Work out the kinks until you can scale it. And it seems like that's what you guys have done.
We have. We're a little bit like Al Davis, who used to own the LA Raiders. Al was he was the rogue. He was the bronking buck, and the other owners, they weren't thrilled with Al. But then by the end, Al was the head of the competition committee, which is an important committee in the NFL, and he was the revered one. So, we're a little bit like that. We went from being the young Al Davis to the senior Al Davis.
That's a good place to be.
It is.
So what's next for ProScan and the group? Anything exciting coming in the future?
There is. We are very focused on thoughtful growth, thoughtful partnering opportunities, raising the bar of care in the environments where we are comfortable playing. I'm not sure we'd be comfortable, playing in, lower Manhattan, for instance. So that is happening for us right now. And then most importantly, servicing and maintaining our client base, our 2, soon to be 3 hospitals in Naples, which is, a beloved relationship with a beloved CEO. You don't get to see that very often. The CEO of a hospital system is just a prince of a human being. And, we work very carefully with his team. We're partnering with HSS on their hospital down here in Naples, Florida. I think they may even also build a hospital inland in a more indigent community. So, next year we're going to have 3 hospitals in this market. And I think we have 10 or 11 outpatient imaging centers. And then, focusing on our philanthropy. Bryan, I didn't know how to spell philanthropy until I got married. I was just focused on, making a living for my wife and 6 children, but, I learned a lot from my wife and life partner who, is everything to me. And, she and my business partner, the broadcaster Chris Collinsworth, and his wife Holly, they have really raised the bar of care for women's imaging in the Cincinnati tri-state area. And then they've also done something very interesting. Penny and Holly recognize, especially Penny, that chess had a major impact on the behavior, the concentration, and the intellectual development of children. So they began a chess tournament at Paul Brown Stadium. About 600 kids come, 5,000 adults. It's been going on for 23 years. The world's best teachers, instructors, national champions come. Kids come from 10, 12, 15 states, mostly inner city kids. And then they have developed a chess in schools program in over 50 schools. So that's something that's really important to us. And as you get older, you become more introspective about what's important in life. And that is very important to us.
Awesome. I love the idea of giving back. You guys have clearly done very well, but it sounds like you want to give back to the community, and you're making good on that. So that's fantastic. What else would you like to add before I hit on our summary? Because I think you have took us through quite a ride with a lot of positives here on ProScan with a very unique group model. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, that's a ton of information. I guess the other thing I would like to do is encourage people to go to Medality.com and really have a look at the quality of information that exists there. We are an ACCME accrediting body with distinction. I think there's only maybe 5 of those in the whole U.S., and I am not aware of any private organization that has that with distinction in the past. And this platform offers mastery services that are really curated globally by renowned radiologists. So some of the best teachers in the world are on Medality.com, and it extends its offerings to remote fellowships, to assistance with residency programs. We have a huge library of captivating courses and compelling case studies and vignettes that are no more than 3 to 5 minutes in length. But I think more importantly, the quality of the information speaks to who we are. And again, we are just one investor. There are many investors in that company, but we're very proud that we were involved in seeding it in its origins.
Yeah, and I know Dan too, and I am a subscriber to Medality, and I love the short little bites you can get from it. You don't feel like you're watching a video for 30 minutes at a time. I still have to do my neuro fellowship, which I've signed up for, and I need to make that happen, my remote fellowship, but it is a great product so far.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And of course, because those vignettes are so condensed and short, you can be on the train.
Right, and listen to a couple.
On your way from Columbia to downtown, and you can listen to a couple vignettes on your headphones and get a lot out of it. So it is the future of how teaching is going to be done in medicine.
Awesome. Well, that is so great. And let me go run through a summary. If there's anything to add, you just go ahead and do it. So first thing I had, I just can't get over you when you were younger, when you said you wanted to be the best in the world at something. I think that is so unique. I don't really have a commentary on that. I just wonder what it would take for me to say I want to be the best in the world at this. And that is a unique character attribute that if I had to look externally, had to have something to do with your success. I think you probably took that filter and you applied it to everything you did, because you didn't really know what you were going to be the best at, right? So that filter is very unique, and I love that, and just want to make sure to highlight that.
Although I appreciate that, and as I said, I self-reflected on why I had that ambition in me. It seems a little egocentric, but I think it was because, my father was not available for the first decade of my life. My mother worked from 7 a.m. to, she didn't get home till 5 p.m. as a school teacher, so I was a latchkey kid. I had one sister, and the two of us were alone a lot. And I wouldn't call it attention getting, but I think I wanted to just demonstrate to my folks that, I could succeed at a high level at something. It never occurred to me at the time, but in trying to self-reflect why I had that in me, and or maybe it's just who I am, because my father was a very, very determined person. So was my mother. They both were very ambitious, hardworking people. And I'm sure that played into it to some degree.
Well, you definitely have taken everything you do to the next level. And I think it shows that you try extremely hard to be the best at whatever you do. And, you've hit on many of those silos. I think that is very clear. And I think that's awesome. And I really just wanted to highlight that, you know what, maybe you can say you want to be the best in the world if you're out there. If you've got something you really want to do and you've got that drive and passion, it doesn't hurt to tell yourself that also.
Oh, you should absolutely strive with no limits on what you're striving for. And I'll just close by saying, there were a lot of people that contributed to that success. First and foremost was my wife, Penny. But her brothers and sisters were exemplary models for me. My business partner, Chris Collinsworth, an exemplary model for me. Mike O'Brien, who ran ProScan, another exemplary, inspirational model for me. And some of the people that I'm working with now, some of the newer folks that I've met, have been exemplary models for me in the hospital world space, which I was discouraged with for many years. And now I'm very encouraged to see people like that love physicians, that really, really care about patients. So I have been very fortunate to have some of these folks that have surrounded me and helped me a lot on my journey.
Well, you've definitely surrounded yourself with great people, including your wife, who you mentioned quite a bit and has such a big impact. I mean, I'm definitely going to remember the story of her saying, hey, you need to go and talk to this Four Seasons manager to learn how to be a service provider, a high quality service provider, and how much that was a level up for your group.
Well, I know Dan, but my 6 children, have turned out to be extraordinary human beings. And it's not common for the father to be an admirer of his or her children, but I truly am. The people that they have become inspire me every day to keep going, even though I'm not a youngster anymore.
Well, you still got the drive as a youngster, that's for sure. Well, that's great. Dr. Pomeranz'a, I can't thank you enough for your time, your wisdom, your story. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of this, and I am truly thankful that you came on and shared your story with us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Bryan.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, DM us at BackTable Innovation on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. BackTable Innovation is produced and hosted by Bryan Hartley,
Aaron Fritz,
Diana Velasquez-Pimentel,
and Eric Amaker.
Our audio team is led by Kieran Gannon, with support from
Josh McWhirter,
Aaron Bowles, Nick Shellcross,
and Ness Smith-Savadoff. Design and digital marketing led by Brian Schmitz.
Social media and PR by Ann Dang.
Administrative support provided by Jamila Kennebrew.
Thanks again for listening.
See you again next week.